We've got our piece of tinder fungus here, so if we've transported a coal to that, let's talk about actually going somewhere with our fire. Now, we don't have to necessarily use tinder fungus. We could already have a fire established, but we're going to have to move. So I want to talk about how to transport that fire. If you had bamboo, bamboo's not accessible to everybody. You can use the shavings on that and use other punky wood, whatever you want to use for the center, but the bamboo is good to transport it. Most of us don't have bamboo, so if you have a punky log, you can hollow it out, but save all of this punky wood because it'll take a coal really well. So it'll transport a coal. If you live in the Southwest and have yucca, agave, or solto, agave's best because it's huge and it is really punky in the center. It'll take a coal, and the outer casing of agave is really hard. You can see here, this is really hard, much harder than yucca or solto. And then the inner part is so easy to just kind of break apart. If you live out in the plains and there are buffalo or cattle, any type of dried dung also carries an ember really well. But you want nice fluffy material. You can bust this up, make it really small. Now you want a lot smaller than these chunks that I'm using right here. I'm just doing this one-handed. And so you put all of your material that burns slowly in the center. So if you have dried leaves, you can use those. They're going to burn much faster and be more likely to ignite. So you got to be careful. You'd want those near the center of your transport, whatever you're using to transport your coal. So that's agave. You can see how it carries a coal really well. I just transferred that from that tinder fungus. This is just a polypore that was cut in cross sections to be able to be used. This punky wood will take a coal, but not as good as agave. So you want material that will smolder and smoke, and that would go in the center, but you're gonna need some way to monitor that. You wanna close that off. And so you could tie this off, and then you could walk with this and monitor the smoke. If it smokes too much, you'll want to kind of seal that off, so you could take some green leaves on the outside and kind of monitor the smoke output, because what you don't want is if it starts smoking a lot, it could ignite, and we just want it to hold that coal so that we can walk with it. And so I would have busted up all of that punky agave or punky wood on the inside, so you might want to split this one if it's a piece of wood, because it'd make it easier than hollowing it out. Split it, cut out the core, and then transfer your ember over to that core, and then you could walk with it. So right now I'm getting a huge breeze, and so luckily that's agave. It's not likely to just instantly catch on fire like yucca will. Yucca can if you get too much airflow, but agave is pretty good. It's kind of like a, I would say that it's similar to cow patties, not as likely. So now I can walk with this, and I might take some cordage, tie that off, and so I can walk from one location to the next. Now the larger piece of wood, punky wood that you use, or agave or whatever you're using, the better it'll be, because it'll kind of be like, it'll burn down into it and give you more resources to burn as you're moving. And then now I can take this to my other location and transport my fire. So that's always a good option, rather than relying solely on primitive forms of friction fire or primitive forms of fire. If you already have a fire going, why not try to transport it? Unless it's just an unrealistic distance. So you would go from camp to camp, wherever you're going to camp next. This would last anywhere, this large piece right here, before I'd have to replace it, probably 2 or 3 hours of smoldering, and then I can bring additional items with me. And agave's lightweight. Let's look at this real quick, and you can already see just setting here how that's burned in. Just in that time frame, and this will hold that coal really well, just as good as tinder fungus. Now, if you had a piece of chaga tinder fungus, this was a polypore, but if you had like birch chaga, a big chunk of birch chaga will hold that coal for a long period of time, and you can control it much easier than you can almost any other forms of fire transport. And so if this starts to burn through too fast, I would stuff additional items in the front that aren't as flammable to block some of that airflow. But you can see it's burning into all sections of that agave. This is just as good to me as having a bunch of cow chips or tinder fungus.